Stoic CEO, Ancient Wisdom for Leadership in Chaotic Times. Introduction, an imperial guide for modern leaders. Leadership has always been an art of balance between power and responsibility, between the personal self and the welfare of others, between the desire for growth and the inevitability of limitations. Epochs changed, empires collapsed, new states were born, but the main question remained the same: how to lead in order to survive amid chaos and at the same time leave behind a legacy worthy of remembrance. I am convinced that the answer to this question does not lie in fashionable business theories or the latest management techniques. It is engraved in the experience of those who have already gone through disorder, fear, uncertainty, and remained unbreakable. The ancient Stoics did not have spreadsheets, stock market indices, or corporate strategies, but they had something much more valuable: the ability to manage themselves in a world where they had to deal with wars, crises, and the unpredictability of fate on a daily basis. Modern leaders, like ancient emperors, live in turbulent times. Only the scale has changed. Instead of legions, there are teams and corporations. Instead of swords, there are innovations and artificial intelligence. Instead of borders between states, there are invisible lines of markets and capital. But the nature of the challenge remains the same. Can you manage yourself well enough to lead others? Stoicism does not offer ready-made recipes for success. It offers something much more. It is not a set of tips that can be applied quickly, but a fundamental change in one's inner position. Stoic wisdom teaches us to see the world as it is, to separate the controllable from the uncontrollable, to turn obstacles into opportunities, and to act calmly when others panic. I call this book the Imperial Manual, for a reason. It is not just about business strategies or management methods. It is about forming an inner emperor, a state of mind where your will, mind, and virtues become the most powerful weapon in a world torn apart by the speed of change. Leadership is not a title or a position. It is a test of character. And in chaos, it is character that determines whether you fall or lift others up. When I say Stoic CEO, I don't mean an idealized, emotionless leader. On the contrary, I am talking about a person who feels deeply, but knows how to stay at the helm, even when the ship is rocked by a storm. Someone who can see beyond today's numbers and reports and think beyond their own benefit. This is a leader who can think in terms of decades and make decisions in minutes. This book is about how to combine the wisdom of ancient philosophers with the challenges of modern business. It is about how to master yourself so that you become a person who is trusted even in the darkest times, because chaos will always be there. History shows that it is not the strongest or even the smartest who survive. Those who survive are those who are able to maintain clarity when others are drowning in chaos. We are embarking on this journey together. What you have before you is not just theory, but tools and principles that have been tested over centuries and remain extremely relevant today. This is your chance to create your own inner code of conduct, which will make you not only a successful leader, but also a person who will leave a legacy behind. Part 1. The basics of Stoic leadership. Every journey begins with a single step, but a true leader knows that the direction of that step determines the entire path ahead. We have already touched on the idea of the inner emperor, the force that allows one to remain unbreakable even in the midst of the most turbulent chaos. Now it is time to lay the foundation, the basics without which no leadership can survive. Stoicism is not only the wisdom of ancient philosophers, but also a practical science of survival, clarity, and strength. And like any science, it has its basic principles that do not age with time. For me, Stoic leadership does not begin with strategies or management techniques. It begins with an inner foundation, values, beliefs, and mental resilience. In today's business world, it is too easy to get lost in endless tactics, trends, and fashionable theories. They change faster than we can adapt to them. But the fundamental ideas that have sustained entire civilizations remain unshakable. Stoicism offers no illusions. It offers clarity. It teaches us to see what we can control and accept what is beyond our power. This is the first stone in the foundation of leadership that does not crumble under the pressure of trials. Imagine Rome, the center of the world, where war, politics, economics, and human passions intertwined. The emperors and generals who left their mark were not just strategists or warriors. They were people who had mastered themselves. And that is what made them capable of leading others. Marcus Aurelius is perhaps the most striking example. He not only ruled the empire, but also wrote down his thoughts every evening in meditations, seeking harmony between the chaos of power and inner clarity. Stoic leadership is the ability not to succumb to the illusion that control over others is more important than control over oneself. Because if you do not control yourself, any power you wield becomes fragile and dangerous. This is not abstract philosophy. It is a practical lesson that every CEO, every manager, everyone who takes responsibility for others must learn. The fundamentals of Stoic leadership are like an internal map. They show where to focus your attention, how to strengthen your character, how to train your endurance, and why virtues are more important than image. It is a map that remains relevant even when borders, currencies, and technologies change. When we talk about the basics, we don't mean simple truths that can be quickly read and forgotten. We are talking about the pillars that support the weight of empires. Virtue, courage, wisdom, and justice are not abstract concepts. They are real guidelines for any leader who wants to leave a legacy behind, not just numbers in financial reports. I invite you to take a deeper look at these principles, because they allow you not only to manage a company or a team, but to become a person who leads without forcing others to follow. A person who is trusted even when the world around is burning. A person who knows that true power begins where the illusion of control ends and discipline of the spirit begins. And so this part of the book is not just an introduction to philosophy, but a key to a door that opens onto a new dimension of leadership. A dimension where the CEO is not just the head of a company, but a guide in chaos, able to show others the way, because he himself sees it clearly. Chapter 1. The philosophy that built empires. Empires do not arise out of nothing. They are not built solely on armies or economic resources. The true foundation of empires has always been invisible, the ideas that shape the mindsets of leaders and peoples. Rome is perhaps the most striking example. Its greatness was based not only on legions, but on a philosophy that taught courage, discipline, and wisdom. Stoicism became the invisible fabric that united people capable of managing the chaos of history. Why did philosophy become the driving force that allowed a small city to grow into a powerful empire? Because no power lasts long if it has no moral foundation. Philosophy was the moral code that defined what it meant to be a leader, how to deal with difficulties, and how to turn defeats into sources of strength. Stoicism shaped the character of people who knew that not everything is under our control, but our attitude is always under our control. I have always been fascinated by the fact that Stoic ideas became a guide for emperors, military leaders, and thinkers. When Marcus Aurelius wrote down his thoughts, he did not seek to create a textbook for others. He sought to remind himself how not to break under the burden of power. And there is a profound truth in this. Leadership begins not with orders, but with inner self-control. The philosophy that built empires taught that life is a constant struggle with uncertainty. There are no guarantees, but there is always the opportunity to choose dignity. In times of chaos, it was this ability that determined who would go down in history as a ruler and who would disappear, forgotten by their own people and descendants. I am convinced that the modern world is not much different from the ancient world in this sense. Yes, we do not go out onto the battlefield with swords, but we fight in the markets, in negotiations, in crisis situations, when the future of hundreds or thousands of people depends on our endurance. We do not build empires in the literal sense, but we build companies, teams, institutions, and all this requires not only strategy, but also a philosophy that makes us stronger than fear and uncertainty. Stoic philosophy gave empires the most important thing, an unbreakable spirit. It taught them not to fear defeat, because every defeat can be a lesson. It taught them not to rejoice excessively in victories, because every victory is temporary. It taught them not to dwell on what is beyond our control, but to focus on what depends on us. This is the foundation of timeless leadership. When I think of a modern CEO who faces the chaos of rapid change, global competition, and unstable markets every day, I see in him a reflection of the ancient emperor. Different times, different tools, but the same challenge: how to remain steadfast when everything around you is falling apart. The answer is the same as it was 2,000 years ago. Rely on a philosophy that forms an unbreakable inner core. The philosophy that built empires is not an abstract story of the past. It is the reality of the present, reminding us that the true strength of a leader lies not in their title, but in their ability to keep themselves under control when the world around them is losing its balance. And it is this strength that enables them to lead others through chaos. 1.1 From the Roman battlefield to the corporate boardroom, every era has its own arenas where the fate of people, structures, and entire empires is decided. For Roman commanders, such an arena was the battlefield, where everything could be lost in an instant. For modern leaders, it is the corporate board of directors, the negotiating room, or the strategic summit, where decisions shape the future of companies and sometimes entire industries. And although the weapons and circumstances have changed, the nature of the challenge remains the same. It is a struggle for survival, trust, and influence in an environment that is never stable. Stoicism in Rome was not just a philosophy for bookshelves. It was a practical tool for commanders, senators, and emperors. The battlefield demanded resilience from leaders. When arrows fly and the earth shakes from the footsteps of legions, there is no room for panic. Those who maintained calm and clarity in the midst of chaos became a point of stability for others. Similarly, in modern business, the CEO becomes the figure that everyone looks to when markets collapse, investors lose confidence, and competitors press forward with new breakthrough technologies. The Roman commander knew that he could not control the wind, rain, or unpredictable betrayal, but he could control his own spirit and the example he set for his legionnaires. This is exactly what a modern leader must realize. He cannot eliminate economic cycles or political crises, but he can shape his team's attitude towards these challenges. Their inner state becomes a guide for others. The key parallel between the Roman battlefield and the modern boardroom is that both arenas test not only knowledge but also character. On the battlefield, it is decided whether you will stand your ground or fall under the pressure of chaos. In business, the test is different. Can you make a decision that will save the company, even when all the numbers scream the opposite? In such moments, trendy training courses and superficial techniques do not work. Only your inner core works, that same Stoic ability to separate the essential from the secondary, the controllable from the uncontrollable. I find it symbolic that modern negotiating tables, like the ancient headquarters of military commanders, often become places where the fates of thousands and even millions of people are decided. Decisions are made on whether jobs will be preserved, whether new products will be created, whether innovation will be introduced or postponed. These are the battles of today. They are less bloody, but no less significant for the future. And just as in ancient Rome, the winners here are those who are able to maintain balance amid chaos. Therefore, the path from the Roman battlefield to the corporate boardroom is not a historical metaphor, but the reality of leadership repeating itself in new forms. Empires are built and destroyed not only by weapons or finances, but above all by a philosophy that keeps the spirit of the leader unbreakable. And if this once helped a commander on the battlefield, today these same principles help a manager lead a company through the storms of the global world. 1.2 Why Ancient Wisdom Surpasses Modern Management Theory. The business world loves novelty. Every year, hundreds of books appear that promise revolutionary approaches to management. Consultants create models that guarantee a breakthrough, and business schools develop new courses in management theory. But it is worth pausing and looking deeper. Most of these ideas disappear as quickly as they appear. They work for a certain time, under certain conditions, but rarely become universal guidelines. Ancient wisdom, on the other hand, is of a completely different nature. It was born in a world where chaos and uncertainty were the rule rather than the exception. The Stoics formulated their principles during times of war, political change, and the rise and fall of empires. It was not a theory for academic discussion, but a practical code that allowed one to survive and remain whole regardless of circumstances. And that is why this wisdom has survived the centuries, because it touches not on external models, but on the inner nature of man. Modern management theory often focuses on tools, motivation systems, organizational structures, management technologies. It is useful, but always limited by context. Ancient philosophy, especially Stoicism, works on a different level, the level of principles. It teaches not how to manage, but who to be so that your leadership makes sense. And this level is more fundamental, because techniques change, but human nature remains the same. The Stoics did not talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, or agile, an approach to project management, especially in IT, based on flexibility. But they did talk about virtues, courage, justice, wisdom, and restraint. These qualities cannot be abolished or replaced with a new methodology. Without them, any modern strategy collapses at the first serious test. Imagine a manager who knows all the modern management models perfectly, but loses self-control during a crisis. His knowledge is powerless because he lacks the most important thing, an inner core. Ancient wisdom also has one invaluable advantage. It is universal. What worked for a warrior on the battlefield or an emperor in the Senate also works for a CEO leading a company through a crisis. Because at the core, it is always the same struggle: how to cope with fear, how to maintain clarity in chaos, how to separate the essential from the unimportant. Management theories offer temporary instructions. Stoicism provides a tool that remains relevant in any era. I believe that this is why ancient philosophy surpasses modern theories, because it does not depend on trends and does not need to be updated. It teaches a leader what has always been and always will be decisive: character, self-discipline, strength of spirit. And therein lies the real advantage. Universal wisdom is always stronger than temporary fashion. Ancient wisdom does not replace modern management tools, but puts them in their proper place. It shows that methods are only means, not the essence. And if a leader has a Stoic foundation, they can use any modern approaches without being a slave to them. Because it is not methodology that manages, it is people who manage. 1. 4 key virtues every CEO should master. Every philosophy that seeks to leave a mark on the ages must have a simple yet fundamental basis. Stoicism is no exception. It boils down to 4 main virtues, without which a person who seeks to lead others will never be able to lead themselves. These virtues are not embellishments or abstract ideals. They are the working tools of a leader, which determine his decisions, his behavior, and ultimately his legacy on a daily basis. For the modern CEO, they are what weapons and legion discipline were for the Roman emperor. Without these virtues, any talent, intellect, or strategy will crumble at the first test. I am talking about wisdom, courage, justice, and moderation. Wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to see the world clearly, without illusions, and to make decisions based on truth rather than desire. For a leader, this means separating noise from substance, trends from fundamental changes, and immediate emotions from long-term principles. A wise CEO does not seek quick wins that will turn into defeat tomorrow. He builds reliable structures that will stand the test of time. Wisdom is not about the amount of knowledge, but about the ability to apply it in such a way that it serves the common good, not one's own ego. Courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. In business as in life, there will always be uncertainty. There will always be risk. There will always be pressure. The courage of a leader lies not in avoiding danger, but in facing it head-on and making decisions even when they are unpopular or painful. It is a virtue that makes a leader an example. If he does not run away from challenges, then the team becomes capable of following him through storms. Fairness. Fairness is the ability to treat people not as tools, but as equal participants in a great cause. It is not just about laws or rules, but about an inner position. Honestly recognizing the contributions of others, caring about the balance between personal success and the well-being of the community. A leader who disregards fairness will sooner or later lose trust, and without trust, power is empty. For a CEO, fairness means building a culture that values honesty, respect, and openness, because that is what creates an environment where people want to give their best. Moderation. Restraint is the art of moderation. In a world of excess, this virtue seems particularly rare. It means knowing when to say enough, when others are striving for more and more. For a leader, it is the ability to control ambition, not let emotions drive actions, and not succumb to the temptation of quick gains. Restraint does not mean weakness. On the contrary, it is a manifestation of the highest strength, because only those who control themselves are capable of controlling others. The 4 Stoic virtues are not an abstract scheme, but a practical compass for every CEO. They help to make decisions that stand the test of time. They build trust, without which there can be no true leadership. They create the inner code that makes a leader not just successful, but unbreakable. And if the modern world resembles the chaos of the Roman Forum or the battlefield of legions, it is these virtues that enable us to stay the course when everything else is sinking into disorder. Because leadership is not about power over others. It is about power over oneself, which gives rise to the true strength to lead.